I'm John Schleicher from the McGowan Library of Medicine at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and I'm very pleased today to welcome our guest, Dr. James Newland. Dr. Newland is an alumnus of the University of Nebraska College of Medicine of the class of 1965, and he's a longtime, well-known professor of pathology. He retired in 2001 and was named Professor Emeritus of Pathology and Microbiology, and we'd like to have him share some of his stories of his time at UNMC, both as a student and throughout his career here at the Med Center. So Jim, if you would tell us about your background, where you're from, and tell us about your education and your years here on the faculty at UNMC.
Well, I was born in Thief River Falls, Minnesota in 1940. It was a disruptive time and the war caused us to move to the West Coast for a while. My father worked for the government as a carpenter, and then eventually we moved back for a while to Thief River and into a town called Grand Forks, North Dakota, where there was a university. My parents were very interested in that. There were two of us boys in the family, and they wanted us to go to college. So that's where my brother and I grew up, and went to school there, and graduated from high school, and then went to the University of North Dakota, which also had a medical school. And I became interested in medicine, and then eventually got into the medical school at North Dakota. And it was a 2-year school then. We in South Dakota and Dartmouth were 2-year medical schools back at that time. We're now full-fledged medical schools, but at that time you had to transfer. I might add that I just happened to take a course in physics a year early, and I met my wife there who also became a physician. And so then it was a matter of transferring somewhere to finish out your last 2 years of medicine. And Nebraska was the place that my wife and I chose to go, and then began in the medical school in about 61, and finished up, or let's see, it had been 63, excuse me, and then graduated in 1965. From there, I went to an internship at the University of Oregon, a rotating internship, followed by a return to Nebraska to take a pathology residency. At the same time, my wife was training in anesthesiology. So that's our kind of our early academic trip back to Nebraska. And after 4 years in pathology, I've got my boards and went on into the U.S. Army. And I spent 1 year in Korea, in South Korea. By the way, I did manage to put 1 foot into North Korea at the DMZ, at the Joint Security Area. That was rather interesting. I spent a year there and then came back to the United States and ended up at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver, Colorado. And I was in the Department of Pathology there, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. One of the things I had always thought about is a small 100-bed hospital somewhere that needed a pathologist, and I could have a colleague or two that would be good friends, and we would share good cases and enjoy the practice of pathology. Well, at that time, there was one of my colleagues there in the department at Fitzsimmons was going to go to the University of Arizona, and he was talking about being with residents and students. And we had residents at Fitzsimmons, and I thought, you know, maybe that's a good idea. So I gave a call to Dr. McCorder, who was the chair at the time at Nebraska, and he said, yeah, come on and take a look at us. So I took the invitation up, and they hired me, and after my tour in the Army was over, I came here in 1972 and stayed there through my entire career. So that's basically it.
Would you tell us a little bit more about your interest in teaching and bettering teaching?
Well, I always enjoyed being with the residents when I was at Fitzsimmons, and I always enjoyed being with students even as a young resident. And so it was just fun being in the classroom to try and convey information to the students and try to make it clear, try to make it useful. And then to see people that would, by their questions, you could tell that they understood and they were asking really good, sophisticated questions. That happens a lot. It just happened the other day in a classroom I was teaching. And so it was just good to be with students. I enjoyed putting together the teaching material because I had to study it in depth. I had to know it very well. And then in practicing pathology, I did a lot of surgical pathology. So we had residents all the time there with us over the microscope. And that was a great, very rewarding to work with the residents and show them something that they've never seen before, and then have them gradually grow and learn until finally they surpassed me. They were better than I was. That was fun to do. It's a very rewarding career, I found.
And how did that idea of working with to make the faculty better teachers as well evolve into faculty development kinds of activities for you?
Yeah, it was when Dr. Linder was the interim dean here that he wanted to have some kind of a program set up whereby there would be faculty development in the area of teaching. And he sent out a general email asking for ideas. So I just typed out my ideas. I probably typed them out a little too well because he asked me to set it up, which I did. And we covered the broad field of teaching, how to lecture, how to hold student attention, how to work in small groups, how to write questions. I learned to write good questions through the National Board of Medical Examiners. I was on the pathology committee for 2 or 3 years there. And so I learned how to do that, how to write objectives. Our medical technologists teaching supervisors were the best at that, and I learned from them. And how to deal with a student, how to respect them as people and treat them as human beings. I did a lot of that. Problem-based learning came along. That was brought to the fore by Bob Waldman, one of our deans. Unfortunately, Bob passed away, but he really brought that aspect of teaching, and it was really something that I embraced. I really believed in problem-based learning. Again, it's a small group type of activity, but it's the students do more talking than you do, which is the way it should be, and you watch them learn and build on their knowledge base.
Also, if you would tell me a little bit more about your experiences as the chief of the medical staff of University Hospital.
That was something that was totally unexpected. We had a chief of staff that I just greatly admired, and so there he was, and I think his time was over. So somebody asked me if I would run for chief of staff. I don't know who it was, and so I said sure, and I didn't think that I would get selected at all. And well, I got the phone call. Guess what? You've been elected. Well, the very first day, July 1, 1991, I got a call from a department chair saying that I have a faculty member that has trouble, and it happened to be a alcohol problem. And so I had to take care of it, and I didn't quite know how, but fortunately we had people here at the university. There's a lady by the name of Sue Smith who still works in that field, and so she taught me and several other people how to do what's called an intervention, and we did it, and it was very successful, I must say, and so that started it out. That was quite an auspicious beginning, and as time went on, we had various problems. My support staff was a lady by the name of Luann Anderson. And she was good. She had been medical staff secretary for a long time, and got me a bunch of reading material, and I found out that even though the bylaws don't say that you can do certain things, legally, like removing a staff member from practice, that you could do that. That was very useful to me to find that out. So we had, of course, I would have to attend committee meetings and so forth and know what's going on in the hospital. There's a lot of things that go on that I can't even talk about today. But it was a very interesting time, and I have to say that we had some wonderful clinicians at the hospital, just like we do now, and it was a good time. The thing I liked about it, if I saw a problem, I could solve it. If I saw a problem, I could solve it. And so having those 6 years was really a gift for me to be able to do that.
And Dr. Rowan Zetterman succeeded you as
Yes, he did.
chief of medical staff.
Yes, he certainly
right.
did, and he did a very good job.
Also, Jim, I know you had a lot of involvement in the school, now College of Allied Health Professions. Would you
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, that's an interesting story. The day we graduated from medical school, the med techs also received their degrees. That was 1965, and the man that was the medical director handed out the degrees. His name was Mort Coolish, Dr. Coolish, and I greatly admired him. Little did I realize that a few years later, when I got back on staff, around 72 or 73, I was asked if I would be the medical director of the School of Medical Technology. And I said, yes, I would. And the good thing about it was that we had so many dedicated, ethical medical technologists to actually do the nuts and bolts of the program. They were wonderful, and our graduates were just shined like stars. They were really good people, and they're still turning them out that way today. And one time we had a survey by the National Accrediting Agency for Clinical Laboratory Sciences, and I had to interact with them along with my program director in medical technology. And lo and behold, I got a phone call asking if I would serve on the Medical Technology Committee of the National Accrediting Agency for Clinical Laboratory Sciences, which I did for many years, and did a lot of surveys of med tech programs around the country. Eventually got on the board of NACLS, we called it, and eventually became chairman of the board. So I got to really see med tech education, they call it clinical laboratory science now, but I got to see that really from that level. And I was able, as medical director, I was able to hire Phyllis Mollenberg from over at Methodist Hospital. And she became our program director and developed it beautifully to the point that we had outreach. She was writing grants. The program just took off, and it's doing, again, very well today as a result of her efforts. So it was a good time, a real good time, and I really feel blessed to have had a part in that program in Allied Health.
You also served as the president of the Faculty Senate.
Yes, I did.
In the 1980s. Could you tell us a little
Yes,
bit
I
about
did.
that?
Well, at that time, we were mainly an information gathering group. And so what I can tell you is that we would go down to the meetings once a month of the Board of Regents as a part of that. And I went with our Vice Chancellor, Bob Bartee, who is still here. We would go down, and it was a fascinating process because basically what I decided, what I was seeing was a legislative process. And at that time, the university, just as now, was expanding, and they would condemn property to add to the university. And of course, the people that were being condemned were not too happy with that. But it was an interesting process to see. I saw some controversy there, what I thought was unnecessary controversy, but that's what happens in a legislative process. But it was good. And then, as president of the Faculty Senate, I also helped Dr. Charlie Andrews, who was our chancellor at that time. We had some faculty problems, and so I sat in with him on those, and it was all very interesting. It was a good time.
Could you tell me a little bit more about who were some of your influences in your career, especially in med school and as an early faculty member?
Well, I have to go back to North Dakota, and I was fortunate in having as my pre-med advisor the dean of the College of Medicine. His name was Ted Harwood. He was an internist. He was a wonderful man. So he was one of my first mentors in medicine. I got a lot of ethics from him, and then of course I was a student when he was dean and in medical school. And then there was a teacher in pathology, the chairman of pathology. His name was Wally Wasdall from Cogswell, North Dakota, a farm boy, but very, very smart, brilliant in fact. And it was his influence that caused me to go into pathology. And then when we came here to Nebraska, I still continued my interest. I spent some time in pathology as a student and then decided to go into it. I really especially liked Dr. Mort Coolish, but he wasn't there when I came back. He had gone into private practice, but we had other really fine pathologists there. I'm thinking in particular of Dr. McCorder, the chair, Dr. Harry McFadden, Dr. Milt Simons was there. Milt just passed away, but they were all very good to me, and I had some wonderful colleagues. Guy Haven was one of them there that I especially appreciated. But Jerry Schenken, who I'm sure you've heard of, was over at Methodist Hospital. But Dr. Schenken always had an interest in the university, and he became a mentor of mine. Another one was Dr. Fred Postian. Fred is gone now. Fred was a gastroenterologist, and I learned a lot about the politics of the medical center and of the College of Medicine from him and from hospital politics. He was a great friend, and I still think about how good he was to me and how much I learned from him.
I know you've also been involved in MOMS, the Metro Omaha Medical Society, and the Nebraska State Medical Association.
Yes.
Would you tell me a little bit more about your work in those organizations?
Sure. In MOMS, I sat on the membership committee for quite a while. That was interesting work because of the people that would come through and join our society. You'd get to have a nodding acquaintance with them. And then for some time, I sat on the MOMS Foundation Committee. We had a medical foundation committee at MOMS, and every year we would decide where we would dole out our funding after having an annual appeal. And so I got to know a lot of people that way. I got to know, for instance, the food bank in Omaha. I got to know, trying to remember her name, Susan Ogborn, who heads that, and just as an example. And then at the state level, again, I sat on the foundation committee, and until recently, actually, after my retirement, I was on the foundation committee there, and I was also on the program committee for some time.
And I was going to mention, you retired in 2001, but I know you've done many, many things since that time.
Yeah.
And one of those was to take several trips to Afghanistan. Could you tell us about those
Yes.
experiences?
Dr. Ward Chambers is here, and Dr. Chambers is involved in the outreach, international outreach of the medical of the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And one of his projects was working with Afghanistan, and there had been several people that had gone over ahead of us, ahead of my wife and myself. But then he asked us if we would go over and do faculty development along with Diana Lowe, Dr. Lowe, who is here. And sure, so we said, yeah, we'd go. And so in 2005, we went over to Kabul, to the Kabul Medical University. and did faculty development very similar to the faculty development that we did here. Obviously, it was in English. I don't know Farsi very well, except maybe Bali, which means yes, I think. That's about all. But we did faculty development there, and I so very much enjoyed working with those physicians. They're wonderful people, just like you and me, and they care about student learning. And then we got to spend some time with the students. Again, the same situation. Human beings are the same all over the world. So we were there in 2005. We went back again a few months later and did some more faculty development. And again, the same impressions. And then in 2007, I went back a third time to give a talk to the faculty of the Kabul Medical University. And that was the last time. Now it's gotten to be a little bit dangerous there, but there's still awfully good people over there. It's too bad that we can't really spend more time working with them.
And you also spent a number of years on the College of Medicine and Admissions Committee.
I certainly did.
Would you tell us a little bit about that and maybe some of the qualities of individuals you looked for?
Yeah, that was a wonderful way for me to kind of cap my career. I would have been interested in being on the admissions committee anytime, but it never worked out. But finally I got onto the admissions committee. And so we would interview students for, what is it, a half hour? We still do that? Yeah, a half hour. And you really had to ask the right questions to get to know them. Where they're from, what are they reading, what are their hobbies. You give them a situation maybe and ask them to kind of tell you what would you do in this instance. But it's mainly just to get the feedback from them, how they're feeling, how they are, what kind of a person they are, what's their hobbies. You would be fascinated by the hobbies that we heard about. One of my applicants raised parakeets. Another one of them repaired old shoes. You just can't believe the wide range of students that we'd see. Some of them were musicians and very good ones. Some of them had been high school teachers, and it was very enjoyable to get to know them and to go to bat for them at the committee. That's what we're supposed to do, is really put their best foot forward on the committee and try and get them into medical school. Yeah, it was a good time, good time.
Would you tell us a little bit more about your involvement with the library and your support for the library?
The library is kind of the heart and soul of the memory of a medical school, especially. And a lot of students come and study there. I used to study in the library when I was a student years ago, and have used libraries a lot. And it seemed like funding was always a problem for the library in later years, so that whatever you could do to help them out as far as funding goes, or whatever you could do, it would be worth it. So my wife and I, Myrna, Dr. Newland, and I got onto the committee that supported it, and we would fundraise among faculty and in the community and bring in funds for them every year. There's an honor society, Alpha Mega Alpha, and we belong to that. And every year, our society there gives funding to the McGowan Library of Medicine. Very important thing to do.
And finally, would you tell me a little bit more about your some of your hobbies and your non-medical interests that you have?
Okay. I love to read. I absolutely love to read. I like history, World War II history. I've done Civil War history, and I like biology. I like to delve into evolution. It's just something that is rewarding to me to learn new things like that. Another thing I do is I do a lot of woodworking. I build furniture. And if you want, I'll build you an ottoman. I still got a couple of cushions left over. So I build those. I build reading desks. I've done regular working desks. I've done several of those, given them away. Let's see, what else? Well, I've done processional crosses for churches and given those away. That's been a lot of fun to do too. So it keeps me busy with my hands, and I like measuring, and I like having things come out right on the money, like my dad used to say.
Very good. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about today? Anything you've thought of that in preparation for the interview that...
Well, it's astounding what's happened here. We came in 1962 and 1963, and where we are right now was not here. We had the hospital just behind us. You can't even see hardly at all what it looked like, and that was about it. And now all these buildings. At the time we came, we didn't realize it, but there was some problems with the university as far as the accrediting agency goes. And but they quickly addressed that. They got a nice clinic building, and it's been onward and upward ever since then. This medical center is really world-renowned in many ways for all the things that they do. It's just, you drive by, and I have to shake my head to think what's happened from a small faculty, just a small faculty, some of them, many of them, from private practice to what we have now.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate the chance to talk to you today, and thank you very much for being here.
Delighted to be here. Good to talk to you.